Hello and welcome. This is Anna's Travel Talk, and I'm your host, Anna Hoy. And I'm not only a travel enthusiast, but I'm also a travel advisor with Vacations by Anna Dream Vacations. And, with 2020 behind us, if you're like me, you are ready to get back to traveling, especially cruising. But what's happening with the cruise industry right now? When can we return to sailing? What is it going to look like with the new health and safety protocols? Well, I'm excited today because I have Gary Bembridge, and he is a successful YouTuber with tips for travelers. He has been on numerous cruises. He stays on top of the cruise industry news, and he's joining me today. And welcome, Gary Bembridge. Thank you, Gary, for joining today.
Great, Anna. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, I appreciate your time. Now, tell our audience, if they're not familiar with you, tell them a little bit about yourself. How long have you been a YouTuber?
So I actually started my YouTube channel right back when YouTube started. So right back in 2006 when it first started. But then I was at the time I was in corporate. I was working for Johnson & Johnson, and I had like a global marketing job, and so I was traveling all around the world, and so it's collecting all sorts of travel stuff, if you like, travel information. And so I was very into technology. So I started podcast when Apple started with podcasts, then YouTube started. So I started posting, in fact, mostly hotel tours and stuff at the time, and then it just sort of spiraled out of that. But it was more of a hobby. And then when I started into cruising, I started posting more cruising stuff. That cruising stuff did really well. And then I'd always decided I was going to retire when I was 55 from corporate life. And so I thought, well, I'd do some marketing consultancy stuff, spend some more time doing my channel. And then once I started focusing on my channel, it just exploded. It just took off. So now pretty much I'm sort of retired officially, but and now my sort of full-time thing is my YouTube channel.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah, well, yeah, I'm definitely one of your YouTube subscribers.
Good.
So I wanted to start off a little bit with what's top of mind right now in the cruise industry is with the vaccines coming out. What does that mean to cruising?
I mean, it's very interesting because at the moment it's kind of it's uncertain in many ways, but I think the traffic, if you like, is heading one way. I mean, I guess what people have heard is, so I'll go through, I think there's 3 or 4 things with the vaccines. I mean, first of all, on a broader scale, I think I guess it's true with all travel, is the vaccines are seen as the way it's going to unlock travel, as it's going to get some sense of normality back to life, as we understand what the vaccines do and don't do and all that sort of stuff. Right. But so cruising will benefit from that. However, I think there's some much more specific things when it comes to cruising that we're seeing. The first of which is, of course, some cruise lines are saying, not many at the moment, but they're saying, to cruise with us, you have to have a vaccine. So there's 3 of them at the moment, 1 in the UK, Saga, 2 in the US, American Steamboat, and Victory, which I guess are the same company.
Yes.
What's interesting is, a lot of people got very upset about that, but actually when you listen to what's happened is no one's challenged them. They haven't been challenged by governments or any agencies in terms of that rule so far anyway. And actually both of them have said they've seen very few cancellations and in fact more bookings as a result of that policy. Now, both of those cruise lines focus on the older traveler. Saga, you have to be over 50. I know the profile with American and Victory's older. So it was a little bit easier for them because they've been vaccinated. So I think we're going to see
their demographic.
Exactly. So I think we're going to see, we don't know how many cruise lines will follow that, but I suspect we will see more doing that. I think the thing that's going to happen though, which is twofold. One of which is cruise lines will include a vaccine as one of your options. So I guess you've seen Avalon, and if you've seen what Avalon have done, and Globus, where they're saying you either have to come with a negative COVID test, or you come with a vaccine, a certificate having had both your jabs, or you have had COVID and you've got the antibodies. So it's becoming part of the layers of protocols. But I think, so it's a slightly long way of answering your question, but
no, it's a great answer.
But I think the big thing that's going to happen, and this is what, if I was placing a bet, this is what I think is going to happen, is I think countries, before they let cruisers come in, as probably even land-based travelers, will start to ask for vaccine certificates or some sort of proof of vaccine. We've already seen the deal signed yesterday or the day before between Greece, Israel, and Cyprus, which have said that their residents, when flights are allowed to move again, will be able to move between those 3 countries if they've got a vaccine certificate with not only to do COVID tests, having no self-isolation or quarantining, It was very interesting because the Cyprus tourism minister, when they announced this initial deal, specifically also spoke about cruising, because he said that 300,000 Israelis go to Cyprus every year, and additional 40,000 go on cruise ships. So already it's clear, the whole tourism, cruise, vaccine thing. Now, those countries have been very vocal and pushing for the vaccine certificate, whatever it ends up being. And now seeing even, in the UK, which is where I'm based, our government's quite, we're doing well on the vaccine. They're not that pro on a vaccine certificate or whatever its passport being used domestically, but they're basically saying we believe vaccine certificates will be required to unlock international travel. So I think we're going to see, if you're a cruise, if you're Cyprus, if you're Grand Cayman or whatever, it's very easy to see them saying, look, if cruises start coming in here, vaccine certificates have a role to play. So I think we're going to see that becoming the big trend. And I know there's going to be lots of discussions of legalities, not legalities, can they, can't they? From the cruise line perspective, but countries, of course, can do it because they have.
It's going to be interesting to see how it all unfolds and what's the time frame for the unfolding. People were thinking that cruising here in US was going to return in May, and it's not looking that way. I know we just heard about Alaska, the Canada travel ban. So we're not sure what the Alaska cruise season is going to look like this year.
And also today, about an hour or two before we recorded this, Norwegians now already moved theirs. They've moved Norwegian, Oceania, and Regent. They've cancelled all their May into June now. So it's already kind of beginning, if you like. So so when do you think people will be back to cruising? Do you think it'll be this year at all, or do you think it's going to be more like 2022, 2023? I guess nobody knows.
True.
Even the cruise lines don't know. When I get asked that question, what I think is most likely to happen this year, but I don't think it's going to happen until at least July, August, maybe even a little bit later than that, is that we're going to see much more domestic kind of cruising. So, for example, I'll use the UK, and I'll come back to this in a second. I think the government in the UK will eventually allow round UK cruising for UK passengers, pretty much as Italy are doing already. France did, Norwegian. So I think, when within a territory, if you like, I think that will be the early opening. I know in the US, once they get past the hurdle with the CDC and the test cruises and all that stuff, the cruise lines are leaning anyway towards something that's much more controlled. So the private island kind of accommodations, because that also ticks the Passenger Vessel Services Act and that stuff. And if you look at interviews sort of with the cruise line, CEOs, they do talk about a slow, staggered return. They do talk about close to home, the role of private islands, and that to me seems the most logical, because moving between countries, domestic, land-based, let alone cruising, is going to be so hard. Everyone's obsessed with the the new variants. I'm sure in the US, I guess you are, because with all the quarantine that's happened in the US. In the UK, we've gone into hotel quarantining for people coming in from most countries because of the South American virus. We obviously have the UK version. So it's hard to see countries easing and wanting to ease quickly. So I would say the earliest we'd like to see something is July-ish time. And it's interesting because Carnival, I guess you might have seen this for your clients anyway, but Carnival, cruise line specifically, not the whole group, they've now said, if you've got a cruise booked to the 31st of July, you can cancel it with no penalty. Or you can hold it and we'll give you a little bit of extra onboard credit. So already, that July timeframe is bubbling. Port Canaveral in their budgeting said they're not expecting any ships until July. So July seems the new
new time frame for, and I haven't even heard of any test cruises. So maybe that will be when the test cruises, you think they're going to do the test cruises, maybe July? Yeah.
Again, if I was betting, I would say it's hard to see test cruises being allowed before July. There's going to be a massive change. Obviously, I guess the US is accelerating vaccines. I'm guessing the CDC aren't going to want to be running test cruises until they feel that's much further down, until cases have come down. They're not going to want people, they're going to be so cautious. I mean, cruising, they're so cautious about cruising anyway. It feels like test cruises July time.
Yeah, and even when traveling now, you have to, if you're going to a destination, see what is their travel restrictions for you when you arrive, but also when you return home, what are your travel restrictions? I'm based out of California, and now it's when you return home, they want you to quarantine, self-quarantine for 14 days.
Yes.
When you come home from anywhere. So I know this is ever changing, and it's, one day it's one thing and the next day it's another thing, but that's the current state. And cruising is a lot more complicated with the CDC involved. It's a little bit more complicated. So I think you're probably right. More of the July, fall, fall time.
And
late summer.
I know in some, and it's more UK ones, but in some of the discussions I've seen with cruise lines talking to agents, they're saying kind of if Q4 onwards is where you can probably be looking at the sort of cruises that are advertised, itineraries that are advertised, being more feasible, because I think the assumption is by then the world will be at a state where, to your point, suddenly you've gone off on a trip to somewhere, wherever it is, whether it's cross state in your case, or you've gone to Mexico, where suddenly there's now a new rule saying, well, you've got to quarantine when you come back. So until there's more confidence that actually you're not suddenly going to be chopping and changing rules.
Yeah, and last year there was a lot of people doing local domestic travel and here in the US and doing road trips, and I'm seeing in the next foreseeable future here, that's what people are going to continue to do until they feel a bit more comfortable. But like you mentioned, with all the changes, who knows what's going to happen. Things could open up in the next 3 months, or it could be much longer. So it's just kind of a wait and see in that area. Now with the cruise lines and the CDC regulations, they've enhanced all of the health and safety protocols. And one of them being the muster drill. Also the no more self-service buffets, a lot of changes, reduced capacity. What are your thoughts on some of the health and safety protocols that you've heard about coming forward?
Yeah, and I mean, I think the protocols that have been proposed, the advantage that's happened is they've now been pretty well road tested, so that's good. And so I'll talk about what's good about them and then what's bad about them, maybe.
Right. Yeah, there has been some cruising. Yeah.
Yeah. So both Italy's been sailing. Some of the German lines have been sailing, and I guess we've got in Singapore, Japan. So, and they've all used roughly the same protocols, and they've kind of been shown that they work from the whole managing the whole situation. So even you might not even know this, but like at the beginning of this week, there was on one of the German sailings, there was a COVID issue, but now because of the way it's managed, it wasn't screamed across all the headlines anymore. Because what happened is through the the process, they do multiple testing, all the protocols, they picked up 4 people that tested positive because they do testing also partway through the cruise. Through their contact tracing, they knew there was, I think it was 9 passengers and 11 crew. They were able to isolate those crews specifically. They then tested them. They tested all the passengers because they have testing capability on board. Because they have a relationship with the Spanish authorities in the Canary Islands, they then were able to then still agree that everyone could leave the ship. They didn't have to lock the ship down. Ship arrived. People could leave because they were all cleared. They could then go home. The people that were quarantined were then taken into an agreed hotel on land in the Canary Islands at the cruise line's expense. And, so that whole process of, because stopping COVID coming on board is, it's an objective, but it's unlikely that it's not going to get on board somehow.
It's good to see how the actual protocols were in place.
Exactly. So those protocols have, they have really locked down. So I think the protocols have been shown to work with most of the cruise lines now have the multiple testing process. So, MSC tests at the beginning, the middle, and the end of a cruise. That's how strict they are now.
Yeah.
Because they have the capability on board, which in the US, the CDC is getting the lines to install all that. The social distancing, the contact tracing, creating the bubbles. So all those things have worked. which is great. However, it doesn't create an experience that a lot of people may want. And I think that's going to put a lot of people cruising, because some of the things that people like to go on a cruise, it's, they want to be sociable, they want to meet new people. A lot of that is not possible because a lot of the protocols won't allow you to dine with people other than in your own party, for example.
Yeah.
You've obviously got to wear masks. Now the CDC rules that you've got in the US are even stricter than the cruise line rules, which are close to Singapore, where you even have to wear masks out on deck. In Europe, the protocols don't require you to wear it out on deck. But the new CDC rules seem stricter. So things like masks, not being social, and of course the excursions is a big one for a lot of people, where all the places that do go to ports, you cannot leave the ship and explore yourself. You have to go on a cruise line excursion in a very controlled way. You can't wander off into shops and that sort of stuff. So
yeah, it definitely changes the experience. I agree.
It changes, so for a lot of people, and what I'm seeing a lot of people coming on the channel is, people are pleased now that the protocols seem to have, they found a way of the protocols that seem to work with cruising, and have been proven and tested pretty robustly. But then they're saying, well, actually, I don't know that I want to go cruising on that basis. I kind of want to wait. So I think that's the challenge. So it's a roundabout of answer questions. The good news is the protocols are there and they seem to work, and people use them and they get by and they stick to them. But it does create a very different cruising experience.
Yeah, it's definitely a very personal decision right now to travel, to cruise, especially with everything that's going on. And I think there's a lot of avid cruisers, correct me if I'm wrong, that will still want to get on board. They'll want to be the first ones on board. It'll be interesting to hear back from them what their experience, was or is. And then first-time cruisers are probably going to be the ones that are going to wait a little bit to see what happens. Now, how many cruises have you been on, would you estimate? Because I know you've been on quite a few.
I've been on 75 cruises.
Wow.
Yeah.
And do you have a favorite cruise line out of all that? Or top 3 maybe?
Well, it's interesting because I always say it's the one I'm about to go on is kind of
yeah, because you get excited.
You get excited about it. I mean, it's sort of and it varies and it chops and changes. I mean, I like because of what I do with my channel, I try and cruise everything, big ships, small ships, mid-sized ships,
luxury in between.
Exactly. I mean, I really like, and I have personally have the nicest time on smaller ships. Like I love Oceania, Azamara style, those sort of size of ships. I really enjoy those ships, partly because I like the size of them. I like the fact you get to know people quite well. It's still, it's very high quality, but it's kind of relaxed. You often go into slightly more unusual ports, from that perspective. But I do still like, I like Cunard a lot. I like Holland America a lot. I like Prince. There's no cruise line that I don't like, I guess, because I see them all as different ways. But if I was,
but you have your preference.
Exactly. Yeah. If I was to choose to go for more of my own for myself, I like the small trips. Now my partner is completely opposite, because I'm very lucky because I go cruising in the olden pre-pandemic. I was almost cruising 10 times a year. So
wow.
Which was fantastic. But of course, what's quite good with my partner who doesn't, because they're working full time. If we're going cruising, they're really clear. I want to go on a pretty good sized ship that's got good entertainment, a casino, a really big gym. So that kind of levels me a little bit, because you realize actually, because I'm spoiled or lucky, you forget actually,
I think you just know what you like after cruising exactly, 75 times. You know what you like.
Exactly.
And I'm with you. I like the casino. I like the nightlife. I liked having variety of things to do on the ship. And of course, the spa's always a good thing to relax, sit by the pool. What do you think of the new Virgin Voyages ships coming out?
Well, it's interesting. I was fortunate enough. I spent one night on the ship when it first came out of the shipyard. It came into the UK. That's a great advantage of living in Europe, actually, is because all the ships, of course, are built in Europe. And so normally when they come out of the shipyard, they do shakedown cruises or preview cruises or whatever. So we get to see a lot of the new ships. So it was in Dover, so I got to spend one night on the ship. So it was a little, there was still I mean, it was sort of finished, but everything wasn't bedded in. So it was really interesting because parts of it I found really interesting. Parts of it I thought, this is never going to work. Like, it just feels like it's not going to work. Like some of the stuff in the cabins, like with the beds that turn
Yeah,
into
that they convert.
And you think, oh, that's not work, and will it be comfortable? The bathrooms didn't feel quite right, so that's but other parts of it were very, some of the inside were really interesting. Some of the restaurants were really interesting. The entertainment was really refreshing because it's very different, but I don't know if it's going to work. They kind of eschewed a lot of the things that you would normally do with the cruise, but I don't know if it's going to work. So I was due to do 2 cruises actually with them this year, which didn't, no, last year, one last year, one this year, it didn't happen. So I'm really keen to get on it when it's in the Caribbean, because I also did in Dover in the middle of winter.
Oh, yeah, different experience being in the sunshine.
But the ship looked pretty grey because the ship's pretty grey, and in the UK in the middle of winter in Dover, a grey ship just didn't look very appealing.
Right.
And you see pictures of it, at Bimini and stuff that they've released. So seeing the ship and experience it when it's warm and the environment.
Yeah, and having the full experience.
Exactly. I mean, I'm sure lots of stuff they're going to do won't work, and some of it will work. And I guess that's the point. They're trying to do things differently. So that's why I really want to get on early on to see, and then go on a little bit later and see what hasn't worked.
Yeah, and I do think it's for a specific demographic.
Yeah.
Right? Would you agree? It's for a specific demographic. It's not for everyone.
Yeah, no, it is. It's going to be interesting because I think who they thought's going to go on and who does go on is going to end up being very different. That's the other thing I want to see, because it's quite expensive in relative terms. If you're sailing out of Miami and you look at, you can go on Norwegian or Carnival or Royal Caribbean, and you compare, like, it's you compare like, for the same price on Virgin, it's a bit more expensive. I know they've thrown much more.
I think they include everything too. So also their number looks higher because they do include everything.
Exactly.
But yeah, you're right. It is a different experience. And I've been on 2 or 3 different cruise lines, not 75 cruises like you, Gary, but I've been on, several different cruise lines, and it is a different experience. Depending on the cruise line and depending, of course, on the itinerary where you're going, you can have a completely different experience and who you're going with, right? If you're going with a group of people, you're going solo, you're going with your partner, it might be a different experience. So now, last question for you before I let you go. What are you most excited about in the future of cruising?
I mean, it's probably changed a little bit. I'll tell you what, sort of thinking beyond all getting back to cruising and all that stuff. The thing I'm very excited about with cruising is with the whole part of opening parts of the world that you couldn't go to before, that whole expedition cruising, going to more remote places, and getting to see places that are quite hard or impossible to do any other way. So, there's obvious, going to Antarctica, going to the Arctic, Galapagos,
right?
But increasingly, looking at, going to parts of South America and stuff. So that was what I was most excited about it, because people were building more and more. There's lots of action in that space around people building more expedition ships, smaller ships to go into more out of the way places, and that's and I think that will probably take a while to take off now, because I think, coming back to what you were saying, I think people are going to want to be staying closer to home and not perhaps go so far away and so scary. But that's ultimately what I'm excited about. Is I love cruising for the experience and going to the Caribbean and the Med. But what I really, really love, and the best trips I've had, is when it's taking you to places that are really hard to get to, and you realize I'm here. Cruising is the best way to get to see it. That's what I'm most excited about.
I love that. That sounds amazing. Yeah, and I think you're right. That is going to take a little bit longer to come to fruition, but I'm excited for the future of cruising. I am getting, calls from people that are wanting to cruise, but most of them are for the end of this year or 2022. Do you have any cruises booked for the rest of this year, or are you looking to 2022?
Yeah, no, I do. I had, because I'm quite organized normally, and I've planned way ahead. So I'd actually had some of this year already organized. Most of that's gone, but I theoretically have a cruise that haven't been cancelled yet: June, July, August, September, October, November, and December. So,
oh wow, one a month.
so one a month. So not December, because the one I'm doing in November it's a month-long Antarctica trip. So
oh, nice. Okay.
So December's not December. That's going to be land-based, going to to Vegas and Palm Springs, but I'm not that optimistic that many of them are going to happen. So, and what I've been doing is, as cruises get cancelled, I'm moving into 2022. So I'm doing a bit what you're saying your clients are doing. I'm saying, okay, that's gone. They move into 2022. So Alaska, for example, I actually moved. I was due to go at the beginning of the season before this whole Canada thing started, but it's like I decided it wasn't going to happen. So I moved my Alaska to 2022 before actually May got cancelled, before the Canada thing came cancelled. But now I'm just moving them like as they happen. I'm just
eventually you'll get to go on all of them, right? And
I'm
hopeful you're going to get to go on all of your cruises for the rest of this year. That'll be wonderful.
I was trying to think the other day, like, which is the first one I think will happen. I think what's going to happen is, I think I still feel I might end cruising before I think I'm going to cruise, maybe July time, but it's not going to be an existing cruise. It's going to be a new cruise. It's going to be something that gets set up to go around the UK only, or something like that. Because of the thing we were talking about earlier, it's hard to see a lot of that stuff that I've got booked happening. So.
Yeah, well, here's hoping that you get to go on
exactly.
a lot of those cruises that you have booked for the rest of the year.
I can't wait to start making content with new footage, like, because obviously for the last year and a bit, it's been, looking at, because people mostly are wanting to watch updates, what's going on, what's happening, and it's going to be so nice to go back, being able to make much more general cruising content.
Yeah, fun videos, like, look, exactly. This is what my cabin looks like. This is the experience.
Yeah, and here's how you pack for a whatever cruise or stuff.
Yeah, after 75 cruises, I would say you're the expert on that, right? You know how to book it. You know how to you know how to pack and
I do it sort of an autopilot now, which is good. Yeah, I almost can autopilot pack and everything.
Yeah, with your eyes closed, you could do it.
Yeah.
So. Well, awesome. Was there anything else that you want to add? Anything that you think we missed?
No, I don't think so. I think we've covered a lot of ground.
Well, I really appreciate you coming on and sharing with your experience of being on 75 cruises and staying on top of the industry. You had a lot of great insight to add. So I really appreciate you coming on, Gary.
Great. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Thank you for watching Anna's Travel Talk. And if you've been inspired today, hit that subscribe button and you'll be notified when we go live with new content. And again, everybody, thank Gary Bembridge for joining us today, and have a great rest of your day. Until next time, happy sailing.